A Rhythm and News, the music store that lost both beats. In 1975, when vinyl records ruled the world and every neighborhood needed its cultural hub, brothers Marcus and David Steinberg opened the first Rhythm and News store in downtown Philadelphia. The concept was deceptively simple, yet revolutionary for its time. Combine a record store with a newsstand, creating a one-stop destination for music lovers and information seekers. The 2,800-square-foot flagship store featured listening booths where customers could preview albums, magazine racks stocked with everything from Rolling Stone to Time, and a coffee counter that predated Starbucks by a decade. What started as a modest investment of $47,000 would grow into a regional empire of 83 locations across the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states. The Steinberg brothers understood something fundamental about American culture in the 70s. Music and news were the twin engines of social connection, and people craved spaces where they could discover both simultaneously. The early success of Rhythm and News stemmed from perfect timing and even better execution. The mid-70s marked the golden age of album-oriented rock, with customers eager to explore entire catalogs rather than just hit singles. The store's knowledgeable staff became local celebrities, known for their ability to recommend obscure B-sides and import pressings. By 1978, the average Rhythm and News location was generating $420,000 in annual revenue, with music accounting for 68% of sales and magazines and newspapers contributing the remainder. The brothers implemented an innovative inventory system that tracked both local radio play and regional newspaper circulation, allowing them to stock products with surgical precision. Their listening stations featured high-end Technics turntables and Sennheiser headphones, creating an audiophile experience that drugstore record sections couldn't match. The combination proved irresistible to a generation that consumed culture voraciously, and by 1980, Rhythm and News had expanded to 27 locations with plans for aggressive nationwide growth. The 80s brought both triumph and the first warning signs of technological disruption. Rhythm and News initially embraced the compact disc revolution, dedicating prime real estate to CD displays and becoming one of the first regional chains to offer disc cleaning services and extended warranties on players. Their CD sales exploded from zero in 1982 to representing 43% of music revenue by 1986. However, the brothers made a crucial miscalculation by maintaining their vinyl inventory at pre-CD levels, believing that records would remain a significant market segment. By 1987, they were sitting on $2.3 million worth of unsold vinyl inventory as customers abandoned albums en masse. The magazine side of the business faced different challenges as cable television began fragmenting audiences and reducing demand for general interest publications. Newsweek circulation dropped 18% between 1985 and 1988, while specialized magazines proliferated, making inventory management increasingly complex. Despite these headaches, Rhythm and News reached its peak in 1988 with 61 locations and total revenues of $34 million, making it the seventh largest music retailer on the East Coast. The late 80s also marked Rhythm and News's most ambitious expansion phase and most catastrophic strategic blunder. Flush with CD profits, the Steinberg brothers launched Rhythm and News Superstores, massive 12,000-square-foot locations that featured concert venues, expanded book sections, and gourmet coffee bars. The first superstore opened in Cherry Hill, New Jersey in 1989, with a performance by local heroes The Hooters, drawing 3,000 customers on opening weekend. Encouraged by this success, they signed leases for 14 additional superstores across Pennsylvania, New York, and Massachusetts, committing to nearly $6 million in annual rent obligations. The superstores required specialized staff including sound engineers, baristas, and event coordinators, inflating labor costs by 47% compared to traditional locations. More critically, the brothers financed this expansion through high-interest commercial loans rather than equity investment, adding $1.2 million in annual interest payments to their overhead. The superstores generated impressive gross revenues but operated on razor-thin margins, and the company found itself dangerously leveraged just as new competitive threats emerged. The early 90s brought a perfect storm of challenges that exposed every weakness in the Rhythm and News business model. Tower Records began aggressive East Coast expansion, opening massive flagship stores in New York and Philadelphia that dwarfed even the largest Rhythm and News locations. Tower's superior buying power allowed them to undercut Rhythm and News prices by an average of 12% on new releases while offering vastly deeper catalog selections. Simultaneously, big-box retailers like Best Buy and Circuit City discovered music's potential as a loss leader, selling popular CDs below cost to drive electronics sales. The magazine business faced an even more severe crisis as desktop publishing flooded the market with niche publications while newspaper readership plummeted among younger demographics. Rhythm and News found themselves squeezed from above by better-funded specialists and from below by discount retailers who treated music as a commodity rather than a cultural experience. Their coffee bar concept, once innovative, suddenly looked quaint compared to the exploding Starbucks phenomenon, and attempts to compete on atmosphere fell flat as customers prioritized convenience and price over ambiance. Management's response to these mounting pressures revealed a fatal combination of stubbornness and poor judgment. Rather than consolidating their strongest locations and abandoning the superstore concept, the Steinberg brothers doubled down on their vision of Rhythm and News as a cultural destination. They invested heavily in upgrading sound systems and expanding their concert programming, booking acts like Suzanne Vega and 10,000 Maniacs at costs that exceeded entire store revenues for weeks at a time. The brothers also launched a disastrous private label initiative, commissioning local artists to record exclusive albums that would differentiate them from competitors. Between 1992 and 1994, they spent $800,000 on recording and manufacturing costs for 17 albums that generated less than $60,000 in sales. Meanwhile, their core inventory management grew increasingly erratic as buyers struggled to predict demand in a rapidly fragmenting market. The company's debt-to-equity ratio ballooned to an unsustainable 4.7 to 1 by 1994, while same-store sales declined for 3 consecutive years as customers migrated to warehouse clubs and emerging online retailers. The technological revolution of the mid-90s caught Rhythm and News completely unprepared, despite clear signals that digital disruption was inevitable. When Amazon launched music sales in 1995, the Steinberg brothers dismissed online retail as a fad that couldn't replicate the tactile experience of browsing physical media. They allocated only $45,000 to their entire e-commerce initiative, creating a primitive website that couldn't process orders and served mainly as a store locator. Meanwhile, the rise of alternative rock and hip-hop fragmented their traditional customer base, as younger consumers gravitated toward genres that Rhythm and News buyers poorly understood. Their purchasing decisions, still influenced by album-oriented rock sensibilities, left them understocked on breakthrough releases from artists like Nirvana, Dr. Dre, and Green Day, while overstocked on aging catalog items. The magazine side of the business collapsed even more dramatically as the early internet provided free access to news and entertainment information that previously required paid subscriptions. By 1996, magazine and newspaper sales represented only 11% of total revenue, down from 32% in the company's heyday, rendering the news portion of their identity essentially meaningless. The final years of Rhythm and News read like a case study in how not to manage corporate crisis. Facing mounting losses and creditor pressure, the brothers began closing their most expensive locations first, including flagship superstores that had defined their brand identity. This backwards approach eliminated their most visible marketing while preserving marginal strip mall locations that generated minimal customer excitement. They attempted to pivot toward used CD sales and vinyl nostalgia, but their reputation as a premium retailer made it difficult to attract bargain hunters while their inflated overhead prevented competitive pricing. A desperate rebranding effort in 1997 changed the name to simply Rhythm and introduced a new logo that customers found confusing and uninspiring. The brothers also explored franchise opportunities, but potential partners balked at investing in a shrinking market with an over-leveraged parent company. By late 1997, Rhythm and News employed fewer than 400 people across 28 locations, down from a peak of nearly 1,500 employees. Daily operations consumed more cash than they generated, and the company survived only by liquidating inventory and equipment to meet payroll obligations. The end came swiftly and brutally in the spring of 1998. Unable to secure additional financing or find a buyer for their remaining assets, the The Steinberg brothers filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in March, hoping to reorganize and emerge with a smaller but sustainable operation. However, their largest creditors, led by Sony Music and Warner Bros. Records, refused to extend payment terms and demanded immediate settlement of $3.4 million in outstanding invoices. The final Rhythm and News stores closed their doors on June 15, 1998, exactly 23 years and 2 months after the first location opened in Philadelphia. Liquidation sales drew curious crowds, but generated only enough revenue to satisfy secured creditors, leaving vendors, landlords, and employees with massive unpaid claims totaling over $8 million. The brothers lost their personal guarantees on commercial loans, forcing them to declare individual bankruptcy and surrender their suburban homes and luxury cars. In a particularly bitter irony, several former Rhythm and News locations were converted into Starbucks coffee shops, fulfilling the cafe concept the brothers had pioneered but could never properly execute. The failure of Rhythm and News offers sobering lessons about the dangers of strategic inflexibility in rapidly evolving markets. The Steinberg brothers correctly identified the cultural significance of music retail, but failed to adapt when that significance shifted from physical browsing to digital convenience. Their expansion into superstores might have succeeded in a different era, but the timing coincided perfectly with the industry's transition toward big-box efficiency and online accessibility. The company's death spiral accelerated because management consistently chose expensive, complex solutions over simple, profitable ones, believing that superior customer experience could overcome fundamental economic disadvantages. Perhaps most tragically, Rhythm and News possessed many elements that later proved successful for other retailers, including knowledgeable staff, curated selections, and experiential marketing, but packaged them in an unsustainable business model that prioritized growth over profitability. Today, as independent record stores enjoy a modest renaissance fueled by vinyl's unlikely comeback, the Rhythm and News concept doesn't seem antiquated so much as ahead of its time and behind on execution. The brothers who once defined musical discovery for an entire generation learned too late that in retail, as in music, timing isn't everything, but everything depends on timing.